Hey everyone, my name is Pojo, and we're playing Game 3 versus Sir Rhino. Rhino and I have had just great back and forth across all of the tournaments, and today my Praxis token deck is going up against his Praxis token deck. He's playing a Fire Time Shadow deck. We are able to see each other's lists, by the way, so I know what cards he's going to play or what cards he has, and I can predict some of the things in his deck. So this deck is featured in the Eternal Brews that we put up on Praxis Tokens. It's at the end of the video. It is a Scrap Tank deck. It's really quite cool. I really like this opening hand because it has Claw of the First Dragon. I'm super excited about it, and of course I want to show that off for the streamers. You might be able to see this round on RNG's site because this was the one that actually was successfully recorded. And we have game sound this time, so when I click on totems you can hear me. But I still don't have mic, so I'm providing commentary. Alright, so obviously, I like this initial hand pretty well. I've got Initiate of the Sands to start off with. I don't have any more tokens to play into, and Initiate doesn't really accelerate into anything, but if I can keep it down on the board for a while, then I will get Claw of the First Dragon on 7 or on turn 6 if I can just play out all that power. So that's kind of exciting. And I think Claw of the First Dragon is just the defining card of this matchup, or at least against Rhino's particular list. I think that getting that extra swing, getting a big unit, and also getting like a ton of little 1-drops is super important, and obviously I decided to favor this hand very, very highly. Alright, so Rhino's lists runs Ephemeral Wisp, which is the slower card version, but leads to essentially infinite draw engines, and I silence it very early on. There's a case to be made for silencing the Wisp, and there's a case to be made for holding the silence for Scrap Tank, which is the card that most threatens me in this game, but I'm also just not sure that Scrap Tank isn't going to kill me anyways. So in general, I want to shut down the draw and make it harder for him to get to Scrap Tank, and I want to make sure that he doesn't stall out because I need to put pressure on him since his deck is the slower version and relies a lot more on 4x Vault of the Praxises. So if I can push the game to an early win while he's still setting up his vaults, that's to my favor. And as a result, we play Desert Marshal very aggressively here so that we can develop a really aggressive board. Rhino doesn't have any board clears. His entire strategy is to play as many units as I do, and that's gonna be pretty rough. We get a Xenon Obelisk here, which of course makes his token stronger than mine, but my draw is a Xenon Obelisk right back. I don't want to really risk the Desert Marshal here. It's personal preference on this one. I think that the 3-2 is quite handy since it can block a Scrap Tank, it can do a couple of other useful things, but I'm immediately realizing that at 2 toughness, there's nothing that it isn't going to trade with that's going to be bad, so I might attack with the Desert Marshal next turn. We still have Rally up, and we're waiting on that Claw of the First Dragon? Claw of the First Dragon? I can't remember what it's called. I think it's Claw of the First Dragon. Yes, I can't... So, as I'm recording, the recording element of what the program that I use has kind of a blurry look to it. It looks great once it's done processing, but I can't actually read the title of the card. So we get Assembly Line here, and that puts him in a position where he has just a ton of good blockers. And so I can't really do too much here. I'll throw away some tokens maybe, but overall this doesn't look particularly good for me. I might as well just play out my own tokens and set up for Claw. The Scrap Tank does come down. It comes down on 5, which is useful to me. I'm a little bit worried about Combust here, since if he combusts, I just lose. But I got that 7th power, so I have Claw available, and that's a pretty good deal for me. Now, Rhino can attack all in here, and it's a pretty crazy deal. He does, in fact, choose to attack all in, or he thinks about it, but he maybe doesn't want to do that this turn. I know that he doesn't have rallies in his deck. He's not playing rally at all. He's playing a much slower version of the deck. He plays Assembly Line to defend himself, and we have double rally here, so we're really excited about this. Obviously, we want to set up for that double rally, and so we play Claw of the First Dragon. We really hope he doesn't have the Combust there to buff the Claw and also get one of my little dudes. But in either case, I still get enough units to fill up the board against his board. And this gets really stupid really fast. Yeah, I really liked this game. This was a really fun one. So I consider attacking all in here, but since the rallies aren't going to be all that useful, I decide to hold off and look for like a stand together or the 8th power for my Xenon Obelisk, because the first person to hit 8 power on Obelisk here has a significant advantage. And if I don't hit 8 power, then I'm in trouble. Rhino does in fact play his 8th power, so now all of his tokens are a little bit tougher than mine. And at this point, he's going to make a fairly significant mistake, I believe. Let's go ahead and wait for him to do that. So he's considering his options here, and he goes for the all-out A-space attack. Now, this is really questionable against other token decks, since obviously you could just attack with some of your units and get, like, about the same results. So at this point, because he's attacking all in here, I only have to block enough damage to not take lethal, and keep enough units to do enough damage back to him that I can survive, or that I can kill him. Because I'm pretty certain that there's not, like, any more stuff filling up the board. In fact, it might be better for me to block with my 2/2s here. We haven't ever seen this board state before. This matchup is fairly new to both of us, which is why we both make some minor mistakes here. I think it's right here. So first things first, we try and like fiddle with some possible blocks that give us value. But the value blocks aren't important here, because what's actually important is whether or not we win this game. To that extent, I should be blocking pretty much entirely with my 2/2s and making sure that his board stays alive so that he can't fill the board with more units and therefore get more blockers, because I know that all of his attackers are committed. So if I can get enough units across for the double rally, I win. I do continue to just keep like some single blocks here. I block with the Pyro Knight because it's a trade even, but I actually think that's a mistake. I think I should just be blocking with the 2/2s. I want to keep the Initiates here because the Initiates allow me to possibly draw into the 8th power for Xenon Obelisk to trigger, and thus get me into a really commanding situation. So we block just enough stuff. We lose some stuff in the process, but we don't care about that at all. And we got to see what Rhino's going to play. Turns out it's an Ephemeral Wisp. And Vault of the Praxis is obviously not the card here. The card here is to swing in and double rally. I'm not sure if Rhino is bwahahaing because I win or because I lose, but he's going to find out in just a second. And a simply phenomenal amount of damage. We get a full 18 damage overkill, and that wraps up the first game. Oh, yeah, I really, really enjoyed that one. The sideboard is going to be a little bit tricky here, and there's some interesting things to consider. We have Ikaria available, we have Lumen Defenders, which are a possibility, but maybe not a strong one. We could go for a lot of different options. The thing I'm thinking about right now is, oh yeah, of course I have 3 Furnace Mages in the deck, and those have to come in. I'm thinking about taking out the Praxis Vaults entirely, since my version of the deck wins if it wins on aggression. So if I try to out-Praxis him, I'm not necessarily going to succeed. So we absolutely need the 3 Furnace Mages here. And the thing that I'm discovering about my sideboard is that I really don't want to vary up the sideboard too much. In fact, I should probably consider... when I rebuild this sideboard, I'm going to consider options that, once again, like, allow me to replace some of my cards while not actually fully replacing them. Like, very, very small changes. Like, just anything that creates, like, a tiny bit of life gain, or, like, just in some way still generates tokens or does something interesting. Because at the moment, there's not a lot of space in the deck to actually be moved around. We can only side in, like, 3 or 4 cards before we actually start losing out on tokens. And we're pretty happy with the tokens here. We want to generate as much value as possible on that front. So I put the Vault of the Praxis back in. I feel okay about that. Initiative of the Sands is probably still a very strong card here. Desert Marshal is probably going to be okay. Everything about this looks just fine. I don't think there's actually anything that I want to change here beyond that. So we don't do that. We just put in the 3 Furnace Mages. We take out the Infinite Hourglass because we don't need it. Infinite Hourglass does allow us to do some really good swings without the fear of crackback, but overall, this is going to be about whose board is wider. So we make sure that it's as filled as possible. And we have to reconsider here. Like, there's some deliberating. There's a lot of stuff that's worth considering here. For those of you who don't know, my sideboard right now is 3 Furnace Mages, 3 Copperhall Elites, 2 more Vaults of the Praxis so that I can go up to 4 if I need to, and play out like a heavy control set. Two Icaria Silver Wings. Is that everything? That's 9 plus... I think there's 2 or 3 other cards in here that I might consider. I think there's 2 extra Finest Hour? I don't remember for sure. But yes, in any case, like, there's plenty of different things that we can consider. I decided that I actually do want both Vaults of the Praxis. The Vaults are pretty useful here, and it's nice to have that level of aggression. And if we get into a board stacking situation, I want to be able to stack evenly with him, even if he is drawing more cards than me. The Finest Hours are tempting to take out, especially since, like, we're not really trying to get over too much. We're trying to get cards like Xenon Obelisk. We're trying to get wider than him, as opposed to getting bigger than him, because we'll trade evenly with just about everything that he has. We're never actually trying to deal with a unit that's larger than us. And if we are trying to deal with a unit that's larger than us, then it's because of Xenon Obelisk, and things are super not good. So, yeah. Rhino's looking ready. I can't delete this deck, so I'm very, very sad. We named the deck Praxis of Evil originally, but I decided that I wanted to call it Praxis of Awesome. And so I constantly mess up my sideboards here where I'm just trying to, like, I keep forgetting to clone the deck. And anyways, so this all looks pretty good, and we should be challenging Rhino any second now. There he is. Alright, so again, the Scrap Tank's the biggest threat to me. It is the nastiest card, and if I don't have an answer to it, it's going to be a problem. I could use cards like Finest Hour, but that seems like it's going to be very unlikely to be effective. I'm not sure if Rhino's still running the Combusts. I don't think that he actually does. I believe he stops running them because they're a card disadvantage. I'm not sure if that's right or not, because there is a significant amount of benefit to combusting a unit after playing down a Scrap Tank to make sure that the Scrap Tank is a little bit stronger. But, you know, it's questionable either way. The Combusts really provide him with board disadvantage at this point, because they deplete his cards, and single target removal's terribly not useful against my deck. So that hand looks kind of nice, but it's got some power problems that I'm not super psyched about, so I throw it back. The new hand looks a little bit better. We have Temple Scribe actually on curve, and we draw the Justice Sigil, which is very, very important, because we didn't want to end up in a situation where we didn't have it. Since Temple Scribe is a card that often helps you get to your power while still playing more stuff, this is looking pretty good. We're pretty likely to hit Xenon Obelisk on 4, and indeed we do draw that third power even before we play Temple Scribe. Stand Together's available if not really necessary. I'm still pretty keen on doing the offensive play here and putting the Desert Marshal down on the Wisp. Again, it's a card that you can save for Scrap Tank, but we want to be really, really mean here and just try and push damage as much as possible. And we don't want him to get those extra Praxis draws, because those can really matter when we are both trying to stack the board as fast as possible. Now, Vault of the Praxis comes down on 4, which is not good news for me, but I have Xenon Obelisk on 4, which makes my tokens a little bit better than his, so there's a couple of different options. Since the trades are even either way, I decide to attack first before deciding what to play, and then I play Marison's Disciple to widen my board so that Xenon Obelisk is a bit more of a surprise. I generally favor developing Xenon Obelisk first against controlling decks, since controlling decks will often just try to wreck your day with a Lightning Storm or a Plague. Here, it's fine not to play the Xenon Obelisk first, since I've got some decent options. Now, attacking in here offers the chance that Rhino might try to block with one of the 1/1s, but he's a little too smart for that, so we're not actually going to see that happen. Instead, what's going to happen is he's going to go ahead and block with a couple of his tokens, and probably look for some favorable blocks. We have Stand Together here to fix for that problem, and we did anticipate this being a possibility. A large Scrap Tank is a threat, but it's not necessarily the end of the world for me. And he blocks specifically with Stand Together in mind. So, like, as you can see, he's actually stacked 2 damage on the Desert Marshal, because he knows that Stand Together is in my deck. Rally looks kind of okay here. I get an extra 4 damage in, so that puts him on a pretty difficult pressure clock. And that means that I'll have a better chance of worming my way around Scrap Tank, now that Scrap Tank is a big, scary dude. Now, we do want to develop Xenon Obelisk at some point. We definitely want to put down Furnace Mage and knock Vault of the Praxis off. I'm a little sad that I couldn't do it that turn, but I really wanted to go for the attack. He does get the draw here, as well as putting down a deadly unit to block one of my big guys. So that's kind of rough. Rhino really wants to attack here, and that's a tempting proposition. I think the attack may actually be right, but it's difficult to discern because obviously he fears the crackback quite a bit. I double rallied him last game. There's a lot of ways in which this could go badly for him. So we crack Vault, and that's really useful. I saw this game from RNG Eternal's side afterwards, and he does have, like, I think 2 Marison's Disciples, as well as a third one that he draws almost immediately after. So this ended up saving me a couple of cards from Rhino's hand. Anyways, he plays the Time Sigil out. This 9/9 is a card that I just don't have an answer to. We don't run Vanquishes in the deck. We don't run any way to actually deal with scrap tanks that are that big. There's the potential to run Vanquishes in the deck, but it didn't seem like a necessary thing because we assumed that if somebody decides to make a really, really large unit, we're just going to go around it. Unfortunately, this deck is as wide as it is tall, so this matchup's starting to look pretty bad for me. Alright. Comrade Banner's looking good here. I've got Stand Together, I've got Rally. I've got a lot of ways to make my units beefier, but I need to make my units wider to actually win. So we're going to hold out here for a second. We're going to see if we can actually, like, draw some sort of removal, something fun here. The 2/2 flyer is Inevitability on Rhino's side. If he can clog up the board while keeping those flyers available, that's going to be tough for me. I'm considering Standing Together here, but in the end, it doesn't really seem like it's worth it. Instead, I play Grenadins, and then I have to decide whether or not I want to follow it up with Xenon Obelisk. Overall, the attacks aren't looking great for me yet, and this damage over time is eventually just going to get me. We don't have a serious way to deal with the situation, apart from going even wider on the board. He plays his own Grenadin Drone, and I start my turn. Now the attack here is pretty tempting, of course, because I do have just a pile of extra stuff going on. But overall, this doesn't look like it's gonna work. There's no way for me to kill the scrap tank. What I'd really like to do is attack in a way that actually kills the scrap tank. But I need one more point of damage for that to happen if I'm gonna hit it with the 5/5, which is the most likely target for the scrap tank to block. Now, we get 2 damage over the head here, another 4. The pressure's really on here. I can't let myself get too low because if my opponent just attacks in with a bunch of stuff, there's a chance that he gets around me. I need to get my board wider than his fast, but all that's happening so far is that I'm getting my board bigger than his, which isn't working very well because, obviously, scrap tank. So there's a lot of different potential plays here, and I get my second Stand Together. And this looks interesting because obviously we can get a surprise kill on the scrap tank, but I make a pretty serious mistake here and I leave the 5/5 Overwhelm behind. What I should be doing is leaving behind the 3/3s because these units, the ones that I'm attacking with, are the ones that I can actually stand together in such a way as to kill the scrap tank. If I had attacked with just the 5/5 and the 6/5, if I had attacked with 4 units or 5 units and left behind one of the drones, this would have been a better attack. But I was thinking that I wanted to protect the 5/5 Overwhelm, when in fact this actually dooms the 5/5 Overwhelm because there's no way for me to prevent lethal without blocking with the 5/5 Overwhelm. Obviously, if he had blocked with the 6/5 and just if he had blocked the 6/5 with the scrap tank, and I had been able to rally and stand together and kill the scrap tank, then this would have gone a little bit better for me. But since the largest unit that he can kill is the 6/5, he puts the 1/1 in front of it, and obviously he just puts a 3/3 in front of the 9/9 because we are much more we can't possibly buff that unit enough to kill the scrap tank. So this all looks pretty bad for me, and in fact this is probably the end of the game. There's not really much that I can do. This attack was definitely a mistake, so we get to feel bad about it as we go into the next round. The attack does go through. We resolve some of the board. The wisps die. He's still got enough stuff on the crackback to be kind of scary for me. He can't actually kill me this turn, but he sabotages, and that means that I have to lose the Stand Together or lose the Rally, either of which is my way to end the game. I don't think it's right necessarily to use those two spells, but I've already lost the game and I know it, so we just sort of give him like an auto concede and let him finish me off in the most entertaining way possible. So yeah, I wasn't super enthused with my play of this game. It's possible that if I'd played it better, we might have actually won this particular round. But as it is, we go into round 3, and we are carefully considering what it is that we need to change about our deck. Overall, there's actually not too much that we want to change about the deck, because Furnace Mage is like the most important card here, and anything else that I'm putting down doesn't actually answer Scrap Tank in a super effective way. I could play Icaria here, but it's not really going to be any more important. The reason I lost that game wasn't because of my card quality, it was because of my play. So I decided not really to sideboard anything. Rhino doesn't really have to make many changes either, because we are, of course, running very particular decks, and he won that round. So there's not too much that is going to change his mind about what to run. There's always the possibility that you minimize your own attachments and go for an even wider board. This was something that I was thinking of as a counter sideboard, where we just go Furnace Mages and Copper Hall Elites, and don't go Xenon Obelisks and stuff, because that way we answer Furnace Mage better. But that's silly, really, and Xenon Obelisk is still our best way of winning this game. Even if a Furnace Mage happens, Xenon Obelisk is just a sick way to buff over, so we don't change anything about the sideboard. And once again, we get a hand with Initiate and Claw of the First Dragon in it. This hand looks really good because Diplomatic Seal gets us the time for Initiate, so we get to play the 3-drop on 3, and that gets us extra power and also thins out our deck a little bit. The more deck thinning we have, the more stuff we draw, and also we're just playing down a bunch of tokens, so that looks nice. So yeah, we're super happy to just play off of this hand, and we're happy to keep it. Initiate comes down on 1. There's very little in Rhino's deck that can kill an Initiate on 1. Obviously there's Combust, but we don't even know if he's running it at this point, so we don't feel particularly threatened by single target removal. Amber Acolyte comes down here, and it's possible that we're going to trade it with the 1/1s, but overall the incremental damage doesn't hurt us as much as we hurt Rhino if we attack back into this, so I'm pretty good with just sitting still. We see a second Ephemeral Wisp, which means that we just don't really have much to do here. I definitely don't want to play Furnace Mage without seeing a Vault first. I'm really excited about just killing the Vaults as much as possible. So I go ahead and attack in. And we want that chip damage as much as possible, because our win condition is just to get around Rhino with a good rally or a stand together, and he's going to be trying to build his board as wide as possible for that not to happen. Rhino doesn't block here because he wants the Xenon Obelisk for the extra 2 damage. I think this is generally a mistake. The chip damage on him is probably more important than, or preventing chip damage to him is probably more important than dealing chip damage to me, since his late game does look a little bit better with Scrap Tank, but overall, things work out fine. And Furnace Mage pops the Xenon Obelisk, which puts us in a very good board position. We're now in a really good shape for the rest of the round. If he plays down a Praxis, a Vault of the Praxis, then I get in trouble because every power that he plays will draw him a card and get him 2 blockers back, if I attack into him, that is. But there's a Claw of the First Dragon available, so I'm feeling pretty excited about it. I go ahead and attack in here because the trades are pretty decent. I can lose the 2/1 to the 1/1, but only if he decides to block the Furnace Mage with like a 2/2 and the other 2/2. So instead, he decides to block the Furnace Mage with one of his own little dudes. I do lose the 2/1 here, but I'm feeling pretty good about my chances. Now, the 2/2 is, of course, the inevitability that he needs to get things going. And we're not as concerned with that as we were last round because we have Claw of the First Dragon. We see the assembly line, but we don't see a Scrap Tank, so we're pretty happy about that fact. The fact that he didn't play a Scrap Tank on his turn 5 means that he might not have it, and if he doesn't have it, then he has a much less likely chance of winning this game. Unfortunately, I believe I'm about to be proven wrong. We have Furnace Mage here, sitting pretty, being a really good blocker for stuff, and we're actually okay with trading units here, but we don't need to trade units. If my opponent attacks too heavily into this board, then I just get to Xenon, Obelisk, and Rally and completely finish him off. So I don't actually have to trade any units here. Now, he does play Scrap Tank, and then he gets all of those attackers in, and I am pretty enthused about this. Like, overall, this looks pretty close to lethal, and we just have to do a little bit of math here to see if it is close enough. Obviously, if we do attack in for potential lethal, he'll be forced to block with Scrap Tank, and Scrap Tank will die. So that, in the end, makes it pretty reasonable to not take any blocks here. We don't want any of his stuff to die because it'll make the Scrap Tank bigger. So we let him take the Claw out. And there was no way that I could avoid taking the Claw out. If I had blocked enough to save the Claw, then Scrap Tank would have been out of the Claw's range. But we have Xenon Obelisk here. We don't have the 8th power, but we're looking like we're sitting pretty. So we put the Obelisk down, swing in with everything, and there's enough stuff here to actually threaten lethal. Now, Rhino has to take blocks that defend Scrap Tank if he can. If he doesn't, then he just loses a bunch of material and takes a bunch of damage for no reason. So he's pretty likely to block one of the 2/2s with the 3/3 as opposed to blocking the 5/4, which, of course, doesn't really make too much of a difference as far as the board is concerned. I'm still really excited about rallying here because if I clear out this much of his board, I believe I have lethal anyways. We are at 5 unblocked units, 6 unblocked units? Yeah, 6 unblocked units means 12 damage plus rally is 18. I believe we're 1 short, but I could actually be miscalculating that. Oh no, it's another 12. Yeah, we have it. The math in this particular instance is somewhat hard, but yes. So, those are our 3 games against Rhino. After this, we get into a rematch against Rewind, who we lost to in round 1. And that will be determining who gets out of the loser's bracket, or not out of the loser's bracket, but gets to proceed on to the semifinals? Semifinals, and into the top 4. So stay tuned for that. I will see you guys in a bit.